Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to start our Sustainable Practice and Events in Hospitality webinar. My name is Maria del Mar Trejos. I am the Senior Program for the Miami-Dade Environmental Education Program at the FIU Sea-Level Solutions Center in the Institute of Environment. I'm really excited to be part of this interdisciplinary collaboration, which is truly to achieve a sustainable Miami. So today I'm being joined by my director, Dr. Tiffany Truxler from Sea-Level Solutions Center at FIU. We have the honor of also being with Dr. Susan Jacobson from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications at FIU, my colleague Alyssa Hernandez from the Sea-Level Solutions Center. And today's wonderful panelists, which I'm super excited about, we have Vivian Belsagai and Dr. John Bushman as well, which they will be introducing themselves. So today, in today's webinar, we have the option for you to ask questions. You'll be able to see them in the bottom bar where you can participate in our polls, in our Q&A. So if at any time you have any questions, you can go ahead and submit those there and we'll get to them to the panelists. So Dr. Truxler, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about our programming?
Yeah, thank you, Mari. So thanks everyone for joining us today. My name's Tiffany Troxler. I'm a wetland ecologist at FIU. So today's program is presented by the Sea-Level Solutions Center and the Institute of Environment, as Mari mentioned, as well as the Department of Journalism and Media at Florida International University. And a little about the Sea-Level Solutions Center. It focuses on advancing science, knowledge, decision-making, and actions toward mitigating the causes and adapting to the effects of sea level rise and climate change. And we do this through advancing work in research, collaboration, education, communication, and outreach. And today's program was made possible by a grant from the Miami-Dade County Environmental Education Community-Based Organization Funding Program. And the purpose of the program is to increase awareness and knowledge about environmental issues, to provide skills needed to make informed decisions and take responsible actions, enhance critical thinking, problem solving, and effective decision-making skills, and to help understand how to weigh various sides of an environmental issue to make informed and responsible decisions. So the program addresses four priority areas of environmental education of the Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources in the Division of Environmental Resources Management at Miami-Dade County, as well as the Water and Sewer Department and the Department of Solid Waste Management. And these priority areas include water pollution, water conservation, drinking water quality, urban forestry, recycling and solid waste management, and general environmental quality. So thanks again for joining us today, and we really hope you enjoy the program. Thanks, Mari.
Thank you, Dr. Truxler. Alyssa, would you like to go ahead and get us started, introduce yourself, and get us started with our first poll?
Of course, thanks, Maddie. Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa. I'm the Program Assistant Coordinator for this webinar. So we're going to first start off with a quality of life survey. These are the kind of questions that are pretty general. We're going to launch a poll right now, and we're going to have about 7 minutes for you guys to answer these. So please start. Has everybody, I don't know if I could see the attendees to get an okay. So we have our first question. I am a non-student or student. So I know we have some of Dr. Bushman's students here, so make sure to answer that. We also have the next question as type of business where I work. I'm gonna give you guys a few minutes. I'll space out my questions for you. The next question is, what are the 3 most important things that determine your quality of life? We do have a comment that the polls are not, you are not able to submit the polls. So essentially what you have to do is make sure you answer all the questions. And then when you reach the end, you have to scroll past that last answer of the last question and then press submit. If you are having issues, you can send me a personal message. I am getting responses, I'm getting results, so that means that the function is working. Okay, perfect. Who was it? The person that was not able to submit got it. Okay. So for those of you, number 4, what are the 3 most important concerns that you have about sea level rise and flooding? Very applicable to Miami. Number 5, what are the 3 most important concerns you have about other impacts of climate change? Very applicable to this time right now. And the last question, what do you think are the 3 highest priority initiatives or actions that can be done in order to reduce these impacts and improve your quality of life? I want to hear what you guys have to say. So we have 40% of people voting. At the end, I will show the results. That way everybody can kind of get an idea and a feel for who we have on board today. We're at 60%. That's awesome. Just gonna give you guys a few more minutes on this. We might reach 4 minutes, so that's good. %, so we're almost there. Just gonna give you guys a few more minutes. So we have 3 more minutes. We're at 85%. Any last entries want to come in? Anybody else want to answer?
What you got, Alyssa?
Just 20. I'm sorry?
What you got?
So we have 89%. I was about to say 10 more seconds. Yeah, you beat me to it.
People joining, make sure
Yeah.
they're talking.
Yeah. So we have a poll running for those of you that might have joined late. Gonna give you just 10 more seconds for those of you that are just joining, and then we'll go over the questions really quickly. All right, guys, I'm gonna end the poll. All right, so I'm gonna share the results with everyone. We have 39% students, and I'm sorry, other way around, 39% non-students and 61% students, so that's awesome. Glad that we have a mix of that. Mostly private sector and others that are not working. And then for number 3, the most important things that determine their quality of life, we have, we have health, family and friends, and happiness. I think we all share the same kind of morals. That's awesome. We also have for the sea level rise and flooding concerns, mostly the lack of awareness, which is really good. That's why we're here to teach you guys. We also have like water contamination, so that's good. And what are the 3 most important impacts and concerns of climate change? So the increased heat and extreme heat. I know that that is extremely applicable to Miami. And the last one for number 6, the increased use of renewable energy. That's really important. Also the increase of city and community initiatives that support household activities. Awesome. So Mari, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa, and thanks for everyone who participated. So let's get started with our educational portion of this. Let me go ahead and stop sharing the screen. Alyssa, did you get your reports needed for the poll?
Yes.
Awesome,
Yes.
excellent. So I'm just gonna go ahead and close that. Okay, so the question, right? Like, what is sustainability and how can we achieve sustainability? So we all know that sustainability is complex. So we're gonna try to break it down as much as possible. What I want to tell you is that sustainability focuses on meeting essentially the needs of the present without compromising the future generations to meet their needs. So essentially, how do we manage our resources so future generations have a good and stable life? And how are we can be smart and efficient in the way that we do things. So the concept of sustainability is composed of the three pillars. And one of my favorite things to say is like, if one, think of it as a table. So if one of it is wobbling or one is shorter than the other, then essentially the other one's not going to be stable nor efficient. So the three pillars that you can see here are social, environmental, and economic, but they're also known as people, planet, and profit. So like I said, you want to make sure that these are balanced so we can all basically achieve our sustainability. So these are all things that are interconnected, so we must consider the impacts on a larger construct. So the key is to keep in mind that all of these things are interrelated for the rest of the webinar, so you can understand and kind of start connecting the dots between the behaviors and what's going on in our environment. So to achieve sustainability, we implement something that's called adaptive management. So this essentially helps the business become more climate savvy by creating design and critical planning, which we'll go over today with Vivian. She's going to tell us a little bit more about like how do we plan like these sustainable events. And these are practices that you can take anywhere you go. Maybe if you're doing like a birthday party or catering, like, hey, you can always apply some sustainable stuff in your events. So we also will go over what closed loops cycles are with food recovery. So Dr. Bushman's going to talk to us more about like food recovery that we can do. And this is essentially a production process in which post-consumers waste is collected, like recycling and adapting best management practices and implementing in innovative technology. So a lot of exciting things we're going to learn today. Let me go ahead and move forward to this next slide. Where's my mouse? There it is. All right, so climate change. I'm sure a lot of you already know like the basis of climate change, but let's go over them very quickly. So climate change, we have seen how these three pillars like interconnect. So there are a number of human activities that are affecting the whole system, which are creating imbalances while accelerating. So the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and the fact that we're depleting our natural resources much faster than they can naturally replenish are some of our biggest concerns. So the behaviors and activities increase the release of carbon dioxide, which is the CO2, and methane, which is CH4, and nitrous oxide, N20. So, these are heat trapping gases in our atmosphere, which are increasing the greenhouse effect. So where essentially the sun rays get trapped into this atmosphere and they cannot reflect back into space, increasing the global temperature. So this is the diagram that you see on the right-hand side. When we have excess CO2 or this greenhouse gases, it kind of creates this red layer that doesn't allow the sun rays to reflect back. And so it just warms up the globe. So in the bottom, you can see how it's basically by human activity that this has been increasing, and you can see the carbon dioxide over time and the methane release over time in the bottom graphs. And so what happens with these greenhouses? Why does the globe get warmer, and how does this affect our climate? So essentially, the CO2 that is released from the burning of fossil fuels is causing the oceans to get warmer and acidified. And so here on the right-hand side, you can see the coral reef bleaching. So essentially, our coral reefs are dying because they're acidifying. The warmer temperatures are causing our glaciers to melt, which this is causing like sea level rise. And we can see how we are getting stronger storms and our floodings are increasing. And another interesting fact is that we have saltwater intrusion. So essentially salt water starts pushing into the land, and it can start affecting our aquifers and ecosystem, which is something that we've already seen. So our drinking water options or amount starts like depleting. And a warmer atmosphere leads to more extreme weather. So we do have a longer duration and frequency of heat waves. And so what we can do is essentially reduce these greenhouse emissions. We can switch to clean energy, and we can also participate in our citizen science events around our local communities. Okay, so here we have a diagram on pretty much the natural resources usage. Like I mentioned before, we are indeed depleting our natural resources much faster than they can naturally replenish. And this does have to do with population growth and the increasing demands and the kind of lifestyle that we're carrying. And so you can see in the diagram that by 2030, we're going to start getting those concerns about, do we have enough water to supply everybody? And you can also see here in the bottom, the food systems across the world account for more than 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So food is super important. I definitely encourage all of you to dive a little deeper into what's going on with our food production. And remember that to get food from one state to another, it takes transportation, right? It releases CO2 gases, which is one of the greenhouse gases. So we really do have to think, where does my food come from, right? How many gases am I actually being released by eating this product? Can I shop local? So some of the things to keep in mind. And food systems also use a majority of freshwater resources and do contribute to deforestation and biodiversity loss. And you can see some of the diagrams here considering in 2030. So, yeah. All right, this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. When I first started learning about climate change, I was like, okay, well, what about the nutrients? Like, where are nutrients coming from? And like, how am I getting like algae blooms? Why is this happening? So this slide in particular has a lot of information. So you can take screenshots to refer back to. So we're going to talk about fertilizers, and fertilizers contain nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. So when they're applied in excess during like agricultural practices and food production, essentially, and residential activities are as well in our lawns, these unnatural loads of nutrients can result in runoff and leaching into our waterways, creating natural imbalances. So sometimes we have like this sprinklers that have fertilizers in them, but then the wind hits, and then so they take these little particles away, and then so that's another way of leaching fertilizers in our lawns. And essentially when it rains, if you are irrigating and then rain comes and then you had just irrigated, there's like the water ends up running into our stormwater drains, and these go directly into our waterway. Something to keep in mind is that storm drains do not get treated. So essentially what goes down the storm drains goes directly into our waterways. And so if they contain nutrients from fertilizers or debris that they've collected along the way, they'll probably end up in our waterways. So something to keep in mind here is that the 30% of food produced for human consumption is essentially wasted. So we are, in a sense, applying fertilizers in vain. So when food scraps or other organic matter decomposes in our landfills, they generate methane gas. So one way to divert food from landfills is by donating to food banks, shelters, or even composting, which composting you can do it yourself, or you can take it to a community composting site, which I'm sure Dr. Bushman will talk to us a little bit more about that. So just hang on, you'll learn more about it. And landfills are the third largest source of methane emissions in the US. So essentially we really want to divert as much waste as possible, whether it's solid, organic, from our landfills. That way we don't have to deal with these emissions or high greenhouse gases. And so like we mentioned before, you want to save some carbon emissions from processing and transporting food from one site to another. Okay, So climate change, let's talk a little bit about solid waste and marine debris. So plastics are made from petroleum. So these are producing more carbon dioxide emissions. And something to keep in mind here in Miami-Dade is not all plastics or not everything that says recycle is recyclable. You really have to take into consideration what your local facilities accept. And when we go into, like, I don't know if you live in an apartment, but sometimes in these apartments we have these blue bins, or even in your homes, and they have this sign of please don't throw so and so, and a lot of people are like, whatever, like one plastic bag isn't going to do anything. But imagine if all plastic bags that are not being recycled into single stream recycling to these blue bins get there. So sometimes these batches of recycled materials get rejected by the facilities. Essentially, we're not going to be able to recycle that batch. So this is something to consider when we want to educate our attendees, or even our friends that come home, be like, hey, please put that in the right bin, or, you know, hey, I compost this. So Vivian will talk to us more about that one as well. So I want to say no to single-use plastic. Why? We don't need it. Just say no. And when it comes to events, you can sell reusable water bottles or cups, or you can even recycle these materials, or use recycled materials, I meant. So stormwater, we talked about that. It pretty much picks up the debris and along the way, and they can end up in our waterways. So some fun fact you can see here is by 2050, plastic in our oceans will outweigh fish. It predicts a report from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So that was very alarming for me to know, like, what, there's going to be more plastic than fish in the ocean? I never even dreamed of that, but that's going to happen in our generation. So like I said, most plastic do end up in marine debris. All right, so we're in for an exciting conversation here with Vivian. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you, and please do tell us, how can we become a little bit more sustainable? What practices do you suggest for our events, our homes, hospitality, restaurants, anybody in the industry? Please go ahead and let us know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Maria, and everybody on the team. Yeah, so kind of taking all of that information that we just learned, or that a lot of us in here probably already know a little bit about, what I work on is more of the practical application of how we can figure out, kind of element by element in our events, how to be more sustainable. So before we get into kind of the details of that, something that I love for all event organizers or hotel managers, or anybody really who hosts an event, even at your home, something to think about is that each event has and creates its own community and its own impacts on their community. And so that community can, that word kind of, becomes something that's unclear. And so I really want to clarify that, your community can go both internally and externally. Specifically, when you are an organizer or a manager, or, acting on behalf of a company, your community first starts internally, right? It starts with, the top of, whoever's in charge in your organization, and then it trickles down into your employees and staff, then your vendors, and then your attendees, out into your community and out to the planet. So we love to look at this because every time that an event organizer makes a decision on how something is going to run at the event, it really has a ripple effect that goes out all the way out to the local community and to the planet. But the way that we start to turn that around is internally first. So, on the left, you see just kind of like an example of a positive ripple effect, right? If the event organizer really takes on sustainable values and tells their staff and employees, hey, this is important to us, we're going to continue doing this moving forward, please communicate that to your vendors. Then all those employees and staff communicate that to the vendors, and the vendors now understand and get educated on how things are going to work. And then that it translates into the attendees' experience. And then when the attendees experience this and get engaged and really participate in this, that's where it has the opportunity to really go outward into the community and have a positive effect on the planet. So we like to keep this in mind as we're kind of thinking, before we go into the doing of all of the sustainability initiatives, how we're we're kind of looking at the overall community. So looking into kind of the key ways that an event can become more sustainable, and each of these kind of has, you know, a full rabbit hole that you can go down of things that you can do, but these are just kind of some top line tips and things to think about. The first thing we really want to think about is preventing pollution, right? As Maria was just discussing, marine debris is a huge issue. The problem really comes from plastics, and so many events, because they're inherently, you know, a temporary thing, become really dependent on plastics and disposables. And so a lot of these things can become marine debris, that can become pollution in our parks. And then a lot of things also that can become pollution are things that attendees actually bring in themselves. For example, cigarette butts or gum wrappers, or things that just come in people's backpacks or you know, purses. Those things can end up on the ground too. So because this is a thing where both the organizer and the attendee have to kind of do their part, it's important to have a really present preventing pollution campaign before and during the event, as well as after. So some tips for this that can be done are, you know, first thinking about your internal community, going and putting in bans such as we're not allowing styrofoam, we're not allowing single-use plastic, confetti, glitter, balloons, all these things that we know can easily become marine debris. But then also communicating that out to your attendees and saying either we're not allowing this, or we're begging you not to use these things, you know, or to check, you know, something that I do before I go to an event is I check my clothes or anything that I'm wearing to see if anything sheds off of it and can easily become micro litters. And then another thing that's more on the organizer side is to hire a reliable cleaning company and make sure that the cleaning company understands how important this is to you, because in a lot of cases cleaning companies will understand, of course we have to pick up cups and, you know, general trash, but they're not really looking for those really micro litter pieces that are the ones that can be most damaging for the environment, particularly if they end up in our waters in the ocean. Another piece, sorry if we can go back one quickly. So one thing that I wanted to highlight here is a campaign that we did for a local event called Rockastella, which happens at Virginia Key Beach Park, one of the most beautiful parks that we have here in Miami. Kind of looks like this, what I have behind me on my background. So one of the things that we did is we put this campaign into action, and we called the overall campaign Keep Her Wild. That was kind of our overall you know, message around sustainability. But the you know, we used the Leave No Trace, which is kind of really well known as, you know, a preventing pollution campaign, and we made sure that this was communicated in advance of the event as well as in signage, as you see here. And then in the picture on the right, we actually had in our second year, we changed the Leave No Trace campaign to Leave Only Footprints, because we wanted to make it something unique to the event. And in doing that, we had a full Leave Only Footprints team. And so this team had these yellow t-shirts on that said Leave Only Footprints on the back, Keep Her Wild on the front. And they went around doing what we call the dance and cleans. They went out into the dance floors and had people actually, you know, pick up trash with them, and just kind of got everybody engaged into the movement. So that was really fun and an idea I wanted to share. All right. So on waste reduction, again, there's so deep that you can go on this, but I wanted to call to mind the waste hierarchy, right? So first and foremost, we want to reduce. We want to try to take that waste out altogether. If there's a whole thing that you can remove from the waste stream, for example, plastic cups, you know, force everybody to either bring or buy a reusable cup. That's eliminating and reducing an entire element from your waste stream. Or you can reduce the quantity. So that's always the first thing we want to try to do. And then you can go into reusing, repurposing, repairing, anything that can take the materials after they're used and then give them a second life, or hopefully a permanent life where they won't be disposable. Then and only then, when you've done those first two things and made sure that you can try to find, you know, ways to repurpose or to you know, to reduce those waste streams, you can look into recycling and composting. And as Maria said, this is a really, you know, sensitive process and needs to be done specifically for the facilities that are in the local area. And only then after that, you can go into energy recovery or landfilling at the very last option. You can go to the next slide. Then in nature conservation, you know, these are always fun things that we can do to kind of engage the community and build awareness around what ecosystems are present, what we can be doing to protect them. For example, doing beach cleanups or restoration projects, having tree plantings, things like this. It's always fun and a great way to have an extra engagement with your attendees for nature conservation initiatives. Then natural resource management. Again, this is something that we can go so deep into, but this speaks to not only conserving natural resources, but also using them in ways that are the least impactful on the environment. So of course we want to conserve water, conserve energy, try to do things as minimally as possible, but in the events that we can't, you know, completely reduce that consumption, then we want to look at ways that we can use renewable energy, or that we can use recycled products. This is where it gets into responsible sourcing, where you could, you know, make sure that your papers, for example, are sourced responsibly, or that your food is coming from, you know, a local source, or that it's organic or vegan and has the least possible impact on the environment. And then community engagement. This is my favorite. So some of you may be familiar with this campaign that we put together for Ultra in 2019, and then we're starting to do for 2020. This is the Mission Home campaign. So this is a great example of a campaign, like a full marketing campaign that was put behind the sustainability initiatives. And what's important to note here is that the sustainability initiatives were decided first. First, the organization said, we're taking this on. These are all of the things we're going to do. We're going to make sure that we do them properly, and then we're going to communicate them. So it's just important to make sure that you don't over communicate that you know what you're doing from a sustainability perspective, or that you don't over promise or say you're going to do things and then don't do them. But then once you really have that solidified, you can you know, go ahead and kind of, you know, shout it from the rooftops and say to the world what you're doing, because this is the part where you can really get your attendees and your community engaged in your program, and also where you can take credit for all of the awesome things that you're doing for the planet. And then finally, the elephant in the room, public health. You know, we're all dealing with this crazy COVID-19 situation, and so much of us in the events industry and in the hotels industry have been told that now, because of COVID-19, we have no choice but to move back to disposables. And that's simply not true. There are hundreds of health experts that have signed off and said, you know, reusables are absolutely as safe, if not safer in some cases, than disposables. Reusables can be, you know, easily washed, and as long as they're properly sanitized, there's really no concern there. So I just wanted to bring this up because it's something that we should keep in mind, you know, that there's ways to be both healthy and sustainable. Another good example of that is if you have hand sanitizing stations instead of handing out individual hand sanitizers. This cuts down on your single-use plastic, and as long as you have them well stocked, then people will have unlimited access to hand sanitizer. And then finally, just taking a look back, thinking about, you know, again, that ripple effect on your community. You know, this is where you can decide whether you have a negative impact or a positive one. And really, again, thinking about how, you know, each small decision really does ripple out past your community into the planet. It's important to just keep these things in mind and you know, always have the intention of having a positive impact. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was very
You're so welcome.
Alyssa, would you like to go on?
Hi, everyone, again. So we're going to launch our second poll. It's basically, we want to know how we did teaching you the information. So I'm launching it right now. It's just 5 questions, less choices than the last. The first starts off with a true or false question, if carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. The second question, what activity contributes to the 3rd largest source of methane in the United States? Number 3, how can composting reduce impacts of global change? So for example, with climate change or altered nutrient cycles. Now this question number 3, you can choose multiple answers. Number 4 is a true or false as well. Stormwater runoff picks up nutrient pollution and debris along the way, ending up in our waterways and our oceans. And number 5, would you plan to implement one of these activities you learned about, and would you record or report it? This actually introduces us to our next section of the webinar. So yes, essentially if you would use a phone application to track and report such activities that we've been promoting today. So we're gonna give you about 1 to 2 more minutes on this. So far we have 43%. Remember to scroll all the way down in order to press submit. We should have the Jeopardy theme song playing in the background.
That's a good thing to have for our next webinar. Give them some elevator music. Well, we've gotten a lot of responses, so that's awesome. We are at 60% now.
And it looks like we did a good job teaching them.
High five, everyone. Still have some portion to learn, some questions to ask. So definitely go ahead and get those questions in if you have any questions whatsoever, whether it's about climate change, some science behind it, or any recommendations that you'd like us to give you on best management practices for whether it is your next event or restaurant. You can type them in the Q&A.
And if you have questions on, I'm sure, Vivian's experience and all her time doing what she does, those are good questions to direct to her. All right, we're at 66%, so I'll give 1 more minute and then we'll move on. It's okay if you don't know an answer, just educated guesses. We won't judge you.
Not a quiz, not a quiz. Do you want to go ahead and share some of the results?
Yes, so we're at 70%. You want me to end it?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for those that answered. All right, and I will share the results. So for true or false, so number 1, yes, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Number 2, correct, organic waste in landfills is the 3rd largest contributor of methane in the United States. Then like we said, number 3 is multiple choice. So we have 83% answered. Composting decreases landfill waste and methane emissions. For number 4, true or false, correct, everybody 100% selected true. And for number 5, we have some good feedback that 54% would use a reporting device and others would implement, 43% would implement the activity, but we understand sometimes it's hard to report things. So awesome, thank you so much for everyone. I'm gonna stop sharing the results. Mari, can you stop sharing it so I can take pictures?
You got it.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you everyone who participated. And now we're going to tell you how you can actually get involved using our MISA Resource Monitoring app. We have Dr. Susan Jacobson. Would you like to introduce us to what you've been working on? I think you're on mute, so hang on one second, let me unmute you. or maybe you can unmute yourself. Perfect.
I'm now unmuted, thank you. Yes, so we've been working on a simple application where you can record, you can document your composting and recycling and landfill. And you can reach this application at misan.miami/monitor or at miamistories.net/monitor. So I'm going to share my screen. The QR code here will take you to the site. The URL is down at the bottom, but I'm going to share my screen. I cannot share the screen while the other participant is sharing, however. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so this is the Misan Resource Monitor. We have 3 sections, one for composting, one for recycling, one for landfill. We have some instructions, and it's very basic. You enter your name, your email. We will only contact you if we have any questions. The date that you are documenting your composting, recycling, or landfill. How many days, this is the composting monitor, how many days of compost this is, and your location. So when you open the monitor, when you open this little application, you might first see a pop-up window that says miamistories.net wants to know your location. Just say yes. It's just for purposes of putting your putting this little pointer here where you're located. I'm located in the Aventura area. But if for some reason you don't see your location here, you can enter a location. So I'm going to enter FIU's BBC campus, which is at 3000 Northeast 151st Street. There we go. So if you don't see your location here, you can enter it here. And if it still doesn't work, we have a place in the bottom where you can, at the bottom of the form where you can tell us. We want you to try to weigh your compost. And we have a little video in the instructions that will show you how to do that. We want you to estimate the volume of your compost and the unit of measurement that you're using. And in the instructions, we have a video and some instructions on how to do that. How did you determine the volume? Take a picture of your lovely compost, recycling, or landfill. And if it's composting, what is your method? Did you use, these are ways that you can compost. Personally, I live in a condo. My method is to take the compost to the composting center. All right. And if you take it, where did you send it? And if there's anything else you'd like to tell us, and click submit. Now, let me show you just a couple things here. So when you submit stuff, we get lovely images of everybody's compost and recycling and trash from around, and excess resources from around Miami-Dade County. So here's a lovely image of someone's compost. And here's some images of recycling and landfill resources. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to gauge what people are doing around the county and where people are engaged. All right, so again, this is at misan.miami/monitor, or you can do miamistories.net/monitor. It's also available via a link on the misan.miami website. All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Susan. I'm sure you can see my screen now. You can see it? Perfect. All right.
Yes.
So yes, you can scan with your camera and your mobile device to access the resource app. And you can also participate in our next Citizen Science event. So we also have a link and a form in the homepage under projects for you to be able to sign up with your email if you want to participate. We'll be really excited to let you know when we'll be hosting our next Citizen Science event. And let's get started with my favorite part, asking questions to our amazing panelists today. We received some of you guys' questions, so thank you so much. We were able to pull some of them here into our screen. And so these are pretty much what we will be talking, but everyone's welcome to introduce more questions in the Q&A. So let's go ahead and start with this first question here. And either it could be Vivian or John, please let us know what you think. How have events traditionally been held, and how have they been wasteful? How problematic they are for the environment? And I know we talked about it briefly, but can you let us know from your experience?
I think we can probably both hit on this one, Vivian. But from my perspective, I would say that, you know, meetings, large meetings, shows, exhibitions, events. The event planning industry, event planners in general, we work with enormous sort of to-do checklists, a million things, a million items that have to be done in a certain order. And these checklists have very short timelines. And so there's this tendency to, always be on the run behind the gun and trying to get all these things done, and sort of giving a no or a low priority to sustainability or social issues of social responsibility for our events. So, we've seen, for example, at South Beach Wine Food Festival, it takes a good 2 weeks to build up the infrastructure for the event, and takes less than 24 hours to break it all down. So in that breakdown, you've got an enormous amount of material going in every direction, and it needs to be gone within a certain number of hours. I'm sure Vivian has to deal with the same issues with her events. So, there's a lot of potential for capturing these things for reuse and recycling. I don't know if Vivian, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you hit it right on the head with the time. The time is what really just gets in the way. People feel like they don't have time, or they feel also like they don't have energy, like they're tired after the event and we just got to get this out of here. I don't have time to think about where it's going. I'm just doing the easiest thing. And the sad thing is that if there's just a little bit of effort put in advance of the event, then somebody will actually be there to, take it off your hands and do your work for you, So that's what I really like to remind event organizers is yeah, it feels like you don't have time now, but actually this could save you time on the flip side. And then for years to come, you might not even have to worry about this if you work out partnerships that make sense, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's part of one of the questions here I'm scanning down, but one of the smartest things an event planner can do is start a green team or a social responsibility team, whatever you want to call it, very early in the planning, and assign the task of supervising those things to someone who isn't under the same timeline. So maybe you've got someone who's involved in registration, ticketing, something like that, and their job is largely finished before, by the time the event is winding down. That person may have the time and energy and interest to shift over to making sure some of these things are taken care of.
Absolutely. And then to answer the second part of the question of how problematic these events can be for the environment, I mean, if you think about it, especially on these events that are large scale, one event can create more waste in a few hours than one person could create in their entire lifetime. I mean, it is, not just from the waste, but also from the carbon footprint, from, the energy usage, the water usage, how much pollution might be left behind. I mean, this is really, like if an entire person, for their entire lives did everything wastefully, an event might trump that on, in just a few hours. So it's just something to think about when it comes to scale.
Awesome, thanks. So something I also wanted to ask is basically, what are some trends that you've seen, or maybe some misconceptions you find business owners or festivals organizers when they're trying to become more sustainable? And as I addressed one of the questions that we got in our Q&A, we know that there's a lot of new technology, right? So how can we help businesses maybe start connecting to the new technology that's coming? I think sometimes we might explain climate change as as a negative thing, knowing that maybe other states are progressing at a much faster rate than Florida. But how can you see that we can maybe also bring some of the trends that are going in different states to Florida? And I think you've mentioned that with renewable energy, and we had talked about maybe lowering the cost, but if you can type it. I know that was a long question, but maybe if you can also talk about that.
So from my perspective, I'm always focused on food, and the largest misconception is that you cannot do certain things with food at the end of an event, that you can't donate them to shelters and food banks and food pantries, and that's a total misconception. There are laws in place here in Florida and nationally that cover all states in the country that protect you from liability for donating in good faith. So that's a huge misconception when it comes to food, and it blocks a lot of organizers from even attempting to do something with that. And I would say as a trend, the trend is that people are getting educated on this. And not only that, if the event organizer is not already educated on those laws, a lot of event goers or vendors or other types of stakeholders in the programming are asking about it, and in some cases demanding that this, for all the reasons that you've laid out here in this wonderful presentation earlier, that nothing ever good happens when you throw away food.
Yep, agree. From a misconception standpoint, I think, like we already touched on, the time is a big misconception. In a lot of cases, this can save you time if you put the right person in place to manage it for you, or find the right partnerships. Another huge one is money. People automatically think that sustainability is going to cost more, and in many cases it's cost saving or even revenue generating. And then looking into the trends, I think the biggest trend that we're seeing is that young people all over the world really care about sustainability. I saw a report in the last year that said 73% or something like that of millennials are really willing to not only spend more money on a sustainable product, but also to participate in, sustainability programs. And so, I think that this just comes to find that there's so much, marketing and community engagement opportunity in sustainability, because young people really care, and because you are, developing an audience that's going to be with you for a longer period of time. So I love to look at it that way.
Thank you. And John, I know you've worked with local organizations. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience diverting food from landfills? We have a couple pictures from the events you've been working on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tell us more about that experience. How are you making it happen?
So we're going on, I think, 15 years of experience at the South Beach Wine Food Festival with figuring out ways to better divert food from waste. And the most important thing, and very high on that waste hierarchy that Vivian showed, there's also a food waste hierarchy which follows the same track. Once you've done everything you can for reducing waste at the source, the most important thing is to preserve that food and get it into the hands and mouths of people who can really use it. And those people are the food insecure of South Florida and the homeless of South Florida. They're the most in need. So we established relationships with Feeding South Florida, the food bank, major food bank of this area, and in particular with Miami Rescue Mission and Broward Outreach Centers as places that this food could be turned around and used right away. This is another, this particular slide is another way to reduce waste without even getting as far as some of the lower parts of the triangle there, and the digestion and the composting. So if you have food scraps and things that you can't efficiently donate to those organizations for the food insecure and the homeless, get them into a composting facility like we're developing on both campuses at FIU. We're developing now the Living Laboratory, cooperation with, this is our College of Arts and Sciences. We're also looking at ways to bring in hydroponics and aeroponics into our teaching. Vivian was talking about local foods and organic foods. These are great ways that you can teach hospitality and other students to be engaged in this practice from the very beginning. So as far as other organizations we've worked with the food companies. They do food shows. There's an enormous amount of food left over from these, and in their general operations, having relationships with these organizations, having these people on speed dial with a personal relationship where you can make a quick call. What can I do with all these huge amounts of food? Mobile School Pantry in Broward, the South Florida Hunger Coalition. These are different organizations we've worked with. There's a couple of apps. You were mentioning apps earlier, Susan. There's Food Rescue US has developed a very efficient app, and they have a chapter here in Miami. And Feeding South Florida has developed an app, part of their nationwide effort, called Meal Connect. And so it's another way that you can make a connection between food that's left over from an event or any type of hospitality operation and the donor and the donee, and a way to transport it in between. Does that help? Did I
Yeah,
answer the
absolutely. I'm also interested in knowing when, like, doing transportation more efficiently. I believe you mentioned something with Vivian during the Ultra Music Festival and like loading the carts right on time. Could you tell us a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, so I think the first slide that you put up there showed one of the golf carts. And so we, at the festival, we have an entire team of golf carts moving around for different purposes. And so what we did was figure out what times are they busiest and what times are they not that busy. And we were able to sort of organize the food recovery at times when those carts became available. So there was no extra cost involved. They were already on site. It was just a question of talking to the right logistics people and getting the permissions to use those, that we could move food faster and more efficiently. And then another important method in dealing with all that is having a good team of volunteers, as you saw a lot of my students in some of those slides. The generation is engaged, and it doesn't take much to show them what we can do, what a difference we can make in the community by practicing these things.
So we did get a question in the Q&A that has to do with the food. And so more of the composting. Do we have any information regarding any county regarding the implementation of commercial composting facilities in Miami-Dade County? I know, Mari, you've done a few webinars on composting, but I'm not sure if John has a few comments on that.
I've worked with Fertile Earth Foundation, but I'm not that familiar. And of course, what we're developing at FIU, which is more internal. But beyond that.
So I know at the moment we have, thanks. So I know that at the moment, Miami-Dade does not have a composting facility. There is a lot of organizations that are doing their own compost, which is what we would recommend to connect at the moment. But we definitely want for people to get a little bit more involved and definitely get their voice out there. So you know that you can always go to your local politicians and request these things. And that's way we can, make a little bit more of a movement here. But we're a little bit low on time. We have about 3 minutes left. If there's any other questions anybody wants to submit, we can take a look at those.
We do have another question. So we have, what is the South Beach Food and Wine Festival doing to reduce single plastic use? The person, Luis Rodriguez's suggestion was presented to the city of Miami Beach to stop providing attendees single plastic use and instead replace it with bamboo utensil set and cups.
Right.
So one of the interesting things about the festival is that it's a wine and food festival. We put the wine first in the name. And so attendees are actually using glassware, which of course is reusable all along the way. The difficulty, I think, comes with water. So when you're trying to efficiently work with water with 65,000 people and 4 city blocks on the sand of Miami Beach, it's a big challenge. And this is not an area that I've been working in, but it's certainly of interest to me, and I'll keep asking those questions till we find the right solution.
Awesome, sounds great. So I think, Mari, we can conclude our Q&A session.
You got it. Do you want to launch our last poll?
Yes. So our last poll is a quick one. Two questions, sorry. How would you rate today's webinar? And would you like to participate in an upcoming citizen science event? So we'll give you about 30 seconds, quick. Let us know, did we do really good? Would you think that we need to improve somewhere?
And
of course, go ahead.
Thank you, Alyssa. And while you all submit this poll questions, I just want to remind you all, you'll be able to access our recording. You'll be also able to access our PowerPoint presentation. So you can scan this QR code. It's going to take you to the Institute of Environment website. Under Coastlines and Oceans, you'll find the Miami-Dade Environmental Education Grant, all the information that you need to know. And under events, you'll be able to access all this information. And we also have the resources from Vivian. She has created this great guide for elevating environment sustainability. So it's a free guide that you can download. We have also a QR code to her website here, but her website is greenyourevents.com, and you'll also be able to download her guide.
All right, so we're at 89%. All right, we reached 90. So thank you, everyone. It looks like everyone liked it. That's awesome. And I'm glad to hear that many of you are interested in attending our next citizen science events. Here are the results.
So with that being said, it's already 1, so I definitely want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been very exciting to learn so much about your experiences in our community, and we hope that everybody takes home some of the science and share them amongst your friends, and maybe practice some of these in your next event. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.